So today I'm going to share with you a story that will probably sound familiar. This is a story of a legacy publisher that came of age in the print era, built a niche brand, and then hit challenging times and failed to act quickly when the internet shocked the media industry. That probably sounds pretty familiar. What I hope will be different about this story is the approach we're now taking to writing the next chapters of that story. And I'm going to take you through the challenges that we have and the thoughts we're assembling around what to do now with this media brand. I have a very self-serving reason for sharing all this, which is that I value feedback and input and criticism and advice, and I would please ask you all to tell me what you honestly think. That sounds like a crazy idea. That sounds like you're on the right track. I very much appreciate the community and the support of other people in this space. So a few things about me. I just joined at the end of November. And prior to that, I spent 5 years at the Economist Group, where I had a couple of different business areas that over the time that I was there that I was managing. And prior to that, I spent a little more than 10 years working as a consultant. So MIT Technology Review is the world's first technology publication. It was launched in 1899 by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which is the world's premier technology and engineering university. That is some copy from the very first issue that was ever published. Over the years, MIT Technology Review moved from being a publication that synthesized academic research to much more of a magazine as we would come to understand it. I don't know if anyone knows who that gentleman in the last photograph is. That's Buzz Aldrin, who was the second person to set foot on the moon in the Apollo 11 launch in 1969. So he was right after Neil Armstrong, who's the name that everyone remembers. But Buzz Aldrin was an MIT PhD in aeronautics and astronautics. And in that particular issue, he's got a concern about innovation going into things like Facebook and not moonshots and things of that sort. In its current incarnation, MIT Technology Review produces content in bi-monthly print magazines, and this is some of the recent ones that have come out by the team. We also have a daily website, which just went through a relaunch in February, and it's looking really good. It's not quite where we need it to be, but it's looking really good. And we also have a live event series. Our content team is comprised of technology journalists who are deeply embedded in the innovations that are emerging out of laboratories, just as these technologies enter the commercial space and disrupt industries. So for us, it's not about technologies that all of us are using and holding in our hand and maybe carrying in our bags today. It's not about consumer devices like iPhones and all of the rest. It's about innovations that are just about to enter the marketplace, and also those innovations in technology discoveries that we think will be dramatically disruptive to industry. And there are, as you see here, sort of 6 main kind of coverage areas. So to be clear, we derive our authority from MIT, and our perspective and access to leading innovators and technologists comes from that relationship with MIT, but the business is independent from MIT. So there's some funding, of course, but it is we can publish about whatever we want. Our content team creates lists. Every publisher loves lists, and we are no exception. We do a 10 breakthrough technologies list every year, which looks at the 10 technologies that will have the biggest impact in that upcoming year or in upcoming years. I'll take you through a couple of those. I'm not going to take you through all 10, but I'll take you through a couple to give you a taste. We have a 35 innovators under 35 list, which looks at young innovators that are making significant change through their work. and 50 smartest companies, which are companies that are creating or changing the way we do business through the use of technology. Over the years, these lists have become, these lists have had a lot of names that are now household names. So Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Twitter, but there's also a lot of names on the list that are famous or sort of very well known within their own particular specialty field that wouldn't perhaps be something that would make it into the mass media. To give you a bit more color, I'm going to share with you a couple of, just 3 of our 10 breakthrough technologies for 2016, so you can kind of understand a little bit more how we look at the world. So we all know that climate change had a big impact on agricultural productivity because of temperatures and the temperatures that vegetation needs to flourish and to produce seeds and a whole lot of other things besides, which has resulted in food insecurity for large numbers of people, and that was anticipated to get much worse. So the breakthrough technology is gene editing in plants, which has become much more precise and is a natural process using a naturally occurring genome editing tool called CRISPR, which can allow technologists and scientists to edit genes and create traits in plants such as disease resistance and drought tolerance. And that should allow for a more hardy species of plants that can survive in a more challenging climate environment, such as the one we have and will have in the foreseeable future. You can also look for this technology, this CRISPR gene editing technology, to be used in, there's a lot of talk about using it on Zika-carrying mosquitoes and possibly eliminating Zika mosquitoes that carry the Zika virus as a way of wiping out that virus, which is clearly believed to be a problem more in the future. So this particular technology is probably 5 to 10 years from being kind of ready for use, and there will be a lot of controversy and debate over whether or not it's the right thing for us to do as a people, and whether we should be doing these sorts of things. Expect to see lots of media attention around designer babies and all the controversy that brings out. Another problem is a much more kind of daily, everyday problem for us, which is that email sucks. I happen to love email, but I'm also not perhaps the millennials feel differently about email. I can certainly remember a time when we didn't have email, so I have a tremendous fondness for it. But it isn't as interactive, it isn't as engaging, it isn't as communicative as other forms and other technologies. And the breakthrough that we're naming at the moment is Slack. Many of your development teams are probably already using this. Slack was developed by a team of games developers who wanted to do a better job of communicating on the tasks that they were working on. It's much more of an instant messaging communications system, and it's definitely transforming the way businesses communicate, and it will move into consumer use. I happen to, just to share personally, my husband and I use Slack to communicate various tasks that we need to have done and that we share with each other. I'm sure we're probably not the only people who are doing this, although we may be a little bit on the nerd edge. Anyway, if your internal teams aren't using Slack, they will be soon. And possibly you'll see it at home. 10 breakthrough technology number 3, we know that space travel is very, very expensive. It's very expensive for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons is that rockets, generally speaking, are not reusable. So the cost of putting something into the rockets to send things up into space is pretty much, it's a one-time deal. So reusable rockets are the breakthrough. So Blue Origin, which is the company that launched and landed that rocket, is a Jeff Bezos company. He put about $500 million of his own money into this company. Rockets usually get destroyed on their maiden voyage, but being able to have an upright landing and be reused, again, means that we are really seeing the stage set for a new era in spaceflight. That video was from November, and it was at Blue Origin's West Texas launch site. But just last week, SpaceX, you probably will have seen that SpaceX, which is Elon Musk's space travel venture successfully landed a rocket at sea and made a lot of headlines because even the SpaceX team didn't think they were going to succeed in landing it because it was coming in very, very hot, apparently. So anyway, this is really cutting edge stuff. This content that the team looks at is really cutting edge. It's very modern. It's fun to look at. It's engaging to think about and read. And MIT is a place that is literally living in the future. You've got 85 Nobel laureates in the MIT family. There are people there who are coming up with ideas that will change the world of our grandchildren. Innovation is really happening across all disciplines. So how ironic, then, that the content that MIT Technology Review creates and shares with the world is being shared in a very traditional, very offline, non-digital way. Traffic on our site, it's low. Engagement is low. And social media presence is pretty marginal. All of those things are changing and improving, and there's a lot of work that the team is doing, and I'm going to get into a little bit more about what that's about. But generally speaking, MIT Technology Review is a print publication, and yet, we're tracking things like reusable rockets and all the rest. So most of you, maybe all of you, have never even heard of us. And so we've clearly got a challenge there, right? And enter a new board, a great big investment and a commitment to turning the business into something that will be more broadly understood and known, and a new mandate to do that. And that's been a pretty exciting place to be for myself and others who are working with me, because it's really clear that the content and the coverage has a lot of resonance in the marketplace, that there are people who are deeply interested in this content, and we need to do a much better job of kind of pushing it out. So one of my first tasks has been to really kick the tires on our positioning. So who is MIT Technology Review, and who do we want it to be? So we say that we equip audiences with the intelligence to understand and contribute to a world shaped by technology. And in terms of who those audiences are, we sit between the academic world and the consumer space. This is where we think we sit, I should say, and where, this is the hypotheses that we are operating on right now. So if academic journals are kind of down at the bottom, you've got, very academic journals that are published by scholars that are, sort of full of formulae, and only, a dozen people, let's say, will read those articles. You've got quasi-academic journals like Nature and Science that are taking some of that content and trying to make it a little bit more digestible by the non-academic public. I wouldn't say the general public, but the non-academic public. And you've got Wired and New Scientist that are much more mass market consumer publications. In terms of where they are in the technology life, people like Nature and Science are a little bit more looking at the technology of tomorrow, whereas folks like Wired and New Scientist and some of those other names there are really tracking kind of what's happening today. So what you probably have in your pocket, what Apple, what Google, what they are doing at the moment that is impacting us, kind of in the next 6 to 8 months, year, whatever. So we see ourselves as sort of sitting here, and the exact placement is probably open to debate, but we see ourselves as fitting kind of in between the academic world and the consumer space for the tech insider. Maybe a senior business leader, someone with a deep, abiding passion and interest, didn't become an astronaut, but is super interested and always has had a large, sort of space in his or her life for understanding what's going on in space travel. And folks who want to know kind of what's coming around the corner in terms of technology development. What's going to disrupt his company or her life? What might solve the intractable global problems that face us, like climate change, poverty, infectious disease, chronic disease? I've said a number of times at Technology Review that we can think of ourselves as being analogous to the Harvard Business Review. The Harvard Business Review also sits between the academic world and the consumer world. So you can certainly read about how to be a good boss and how to manage your team in places like Financial Times or Fortune or wherever. You can certainly read about the regressions that academics run around strategies that should be adopted in certain market situations in academic journals. But Harvard Business Review very much sort of sits in between and provides that kind of understanding for the insider and the leader about how he or she should take those academic practices and apply them in their own worlds, in their own lives. So it's a much deeper dive than the mass market consumer publications provide, but it's not so in depth that it's it's not applicable or interesting for a less academic reader. And I think there's an analog for us in Technology Review as well. And of course, there's another analog, which is that Harvard Business Review is also owned by a leading name brand university, as are we. I also think there is an analog with The Economist. Again, The Economist is a great read, but it's not for everyone. It's a lot more deep in certain areas than some people want it to be. It's also not as deep in other areas that certain people, it doesn't go as deep in public policy or foreign policy as certainly the journals that are dedicated to those content areas does. But it gives you enough that you can really have a much more practical and informed opinion. So it's much more in depth than sort of the let's say the daily news publishers are. So if that's where we see ourselves, kind of sitting in between, what secures us there? What makes us special? So I like to say that we sit upon nothing less than the world's leading brand in technology and innovation, MIT, nothing less than that. That's quite a lot. But I also think nothing more. We are subject to the same market forces as everyone else. And I think given this, we have a lot to contend with. We have reason to be confident. We have the assets of MIT, and that includes financial support. And we have reason to be confident that we can leverage the assets, including the financial assets, and build something that is sitting in between the consumer and the academic, and it is talking about emerging technologies coming into the marketplace. Just to show off a little bit our some of these assets, MIT Media Lab is that first picture, the sort of the more than the top left picture, and that is designed by I.M. Pei, who designed the pyramids at the Louvre. It is a place that is devoted to projects that are at the convergence of technology, media, art, and design. What does that really mean? Well, I'm not really sure, as in what's actually going on in there. It's, as I said, it's things that not all of us are quite sure what they're doing, but I can tell you a few of the things projects that people at the Media Lab are working on. Things like effective computing, tangible media, object-based media. I'm not really sure what that stuff is. But these are ideas that they're thinking, again, about a 10, 15 year down the path. There are people who are trying to figure out what would that actually look like? What would object-based media really look like? The other image kind of on the far right there is of the Stata Center, and that's designed by Frank Gehry, and it is every bit as impressive in person as it looks here. It's an incredibly cool building architecturally. It also houses labs and offices around computer science and artificial intelligence. And has the office of British innovator Tim Berners-Lee, who was the founder of the World Wide Web and was a participant, if I recall correctly, in the 2012 opening ceremony of the Olympics, or the closing ceremony, I can't remember which it was. Anyway, you all will have remembered that. So we're sitting at the heart of all of these incredible assets, and we need to exploit them as we produce and share the content. And that's really the challenge. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to live the mission? How do we bring the audience to us, keep them engaged by doing really cool, unique, valuable things, and monetize it? That's obviously the ultimate challenge. So some of the ideas we have, the team is working very actively on doing things in video. We can do lab access. We can let you experience the robots teaching each other how to do jigsaw puzzles, which is very cool, by the way, because the knowledge that one robot gains goes into the cloud, and then the next robot can pull that knowledge out of the cloud. So they're effectively teaching each other how to do, solve a particular jigsaw puzzle. That is the stuff of films and cinema and Hollywood. And, as we all know, those films never really turn out so good for the human beings. But it's stuff, these are innovations and these are ideas that are really coming to life today. So we could bring that to life much more than we currently do in a print way by using video, by giving people the chance to interact with the scientists and the technologists who are doing this work. We can do, obviously, sneak peeks, demonstrations. There's a lot we can do, not only within the MIT space, as in sharing the insights from the MIT innovation that's happening kind of right in our back door, but of course all over the world, because being a part of MIT means I can pick up the phone conceptually. I can pick up the phone and say, I'd like to see what you guys are doing, Mr. Zuckerberg. And there's a conversation that will for sure happen, which I think gives us access that is better than a lot of other technology-oriented publications. We're going to host contests. So there are all these people in the universe that are watching MIT, that are students or working in and around MIT, but that are in the broader world as well, who are contests, who would love to do a hackathon to come up with a great idea and a way to tell a story, to communicate an idea to our readers and our audience. So we're going to be doing innovation contests to say, come up with a really cool idea, cool way of using augmented reality to tell a story. And the winner can be used in our publication, either online or however. Augmented reality is a little bit kind of online and offline. We're going to be looking at integrating more virtual reality into our events. There's a little bit that we've done. We're going to be doing a lot more around that. There's obviously some very cool stuff that's happening in VR in the event world. And again, many VR startups that would like to partner with MIT in order to tell the story of what VR enables. And finally, we want to do more with print. We want to look very carefully at print. Print, like the gentleman who spoke before me, print is important to us. Print has its own benefits, and obviously there's a form factor to print that enables people to do things that they can't do. You hold something in your hand, you're having a different experience than when you're interacting with the screen. But today, most publications are using print as another means of publishing what they're already publishing online. And what we want to do is say, what is unique about the physical experience of holding this in your hand? And what should we do to make that experience feel as bold, as modern, as forward-looking, futuristic as we possibly can? Things like pop-up, things like, there are people who can print circuit boards. You can do a printed circuit board, and you can hook up a circuit board, and you can make something happen. I mean, there's a lot you can do when you're actually physically able to hold something, in addition to the things that many people are already doing, like long reads and photo essays. We can do all that stuff today, but what we really want to do is be on the edge of innovation around the form factors of print. We look at people like Monocle for inspiration. Again, we look at pop-up. We look at augmented reality. I'm a big believer, I will say, one more thing, is that I'm a big believer that we don't need a huge audience. We don't need to have 100 million uniques a month. That's not where we're going to go. That's not a desire. It's genuinely not a desire. What we would much prefer to do is very clearly own and inhabit the space that I shared with you on that matrix, and monetize that through all of the different things that that content in this particular space can enable. And I think we can do things like premium product offerings. Again, the gentleman before me was talking about data. I think data is something that we could offer as a premium. We're not probably going to go transactional route, but I think data offerings would make a lot of sense for both for our audience and for our content. So this is a turnaround in the works. We're 6 months into it. The ideas are really starting to flow. The team is super energized. I'm really energized. And I thank you for letting me share the story. And as I said earlier, if you have thoughts or comments or criticism, I'm delighted to hear it, and thanks again for letting me share it with you.
Thank you, that's great. One of the questions from the audience already is this a paid content?
It is, yes. So we take a subscription. We have a subscription revenue model, and that's a pillar of, I call that sort of the pillar of the stool, or sort of the leg of the stool that we're strengthening. We're working on developing a much stronger paid subscription model, which gives you web access as well as print access, and also, of course, we do have an ad sales model.
Right.
For
so it sounds like the website is going to become the hub for everything, is it?
The website is, I think today you could say it really is the hub for everything. What we need to do is be sure that that all of the cool ideas and the cool things that we're able to do really comes across, not only in the website, but also in the print and in the events and other future offerings that we come up with.
Okay.
You know? So everybody's talking about VR and VR this, VR that, and my children are fully into all the VR stuff that I get sent. But yeah, you may have seen that the New York Times is trying to figure out how to get people to come back to look at to visit their VR app more than once, as in, well, that was fun, but I'm bored with it and I don't want to do it again. So how do you actually make it into something that people come back to, and thus you can figure out how it fits into your product portfolio? So I think that's really the challenge. It's not just a challenge of my job. I think it's a challenge really of everybody's job here in thinking about what is the bet sort of for today versus for the longer term. And maybe there's some of this stuff that is about trying out and saying, well, that was a fun little experiment, but it doesn't have any legs. I think that it's totally fine if we do that. But one of the big jobs that we have editorially, anyhow, is filtering out all the whiz-bang cool innovations that are happening in all of the 6 channels that the editorial team covers. Because you can imagine there's a lot that people will tell us is worthy of being on the featured in our publication that actually isn't road-worthy, or it doesn't have that kind of sustainable value. So it's really kind of applying that same thing to the decisions that I make. So we're going to get it wrong, and we're also going to get it right. And we just have to sort of hopefully learn from each time we get it wrong, so that we can do that less frequently in future. It's kind of, as I say, it's kind of the challenge I think of everybody here.
One of the questions from the audience is probably unanswerable, which is, what is your favorite invention?
I really like that rocket, I have to
say.
I
thought you liked
but
that
it
rocket,
may have been, it may just be really good video.
Yes,
I don't know. I'm not a millennial, so I tend to be a little traditional.
By the Slack arrangements you and your husband have made, I think that would be very interesting.
Yes.
Just to review that.
Instead of having to hand each other lists, could you do this, could you do that, it just goes on Slack, and it somehow feels it's disintermediated in some fashion.
You mentioned
Can we give it a try?
You're 6 months in.
Yeah.
How, this is ongoing forever, presumably. But in percentage terms, where are you? Do you have, looking at the back end, have you got the core platform in place that you can plug all these modules on?
No, we don't. We're going to need to, when we talk about things like premium offerings, a data offering, and all of these other things that sort of don't currently exist in the suite of what we have, the print, the current iteration of the digital presence in the events. As we add more to that, we are going to need to build out the back end. So we're not there. But to answer the first part of your question, 6 months in, we have a 5-year plan that gets us on the map in a way that I won't come into a room and find people don't necessarily know who we are. Although it's fine. My ego's not. It's not about my ego, but we do have a 5-year plan. And I think once we've gotten about 3 to 4 years through it, it'll start to be, we hope, something that people in the broader publishing space at least understand. There's interesting things happening over there. Because
also, presumably, you've got a real decision as to how consumer you go. You said you're not obviously a big volume player.
Right.
How well do you understand your audience? I assume that there are super users in there who will pay thousands, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, no, we understand our audience. I would say I would give us about a B- on our knowledge of our audience, but that's something that we're actively at this moment spending quite a lot of time and money to do better at. because we want to figure out exactly where those super users are and what they're spending on, what they would be inclined to spend on, and by obviously going out and talking to them and surveying them and all that kind of stuff. So that's a part of sort of year 1.5 of the 5 years that starts basically July 1st.
Right.